Okay, so Geordie, Canadian Strain is a film that really opens your eyes. I watched it and I could not believe it. It's something that I didn't know much about before watching. So that my viewers know what we're talking about. Do you want to give us a little bit of the plot line?
Yeah, I didn't know much about cannabis before I started writing it, so we can get into that. So, Canadian Strain is about legalization here in Canada. So, it's about a dealer and who is basically put out of business by the government when weed becomes legal, because here in Canada, the government basically took over dealing weed. So, this is a very Canadian way to fix a problem, right? So, the government took over dealing weed, which in itself is very hard to explain to anybody outside of Canada why the government is now dealing weed. So it's a very weird concept to everybody except for Canadians.
And you mentioned you didn't know much about it before you started writing this. So what made you want to write about cannabis and the legalization?
So what interested me, and maybe that's kind of where I was able to kind of come in a somewhat different avenue than the normal sort of cannabis films that we know and love and are hilarious, the Cheech and Chongs, the Pineapple Expresses of the world. What interested me is when legalization. So just for anyone knows, like obviously pot, weed, cannabis is legal now in Canada, and so that happened last year. And before, when Justin Trudeau came to power, our prime minister, current prime minister, said he was going to legalize it. And when that kind of came around and that conversation started to happen and it actually went into becoming law, I just got curious as to what would happen to all these dealers out there, all these weed dealers, and what would go on with them. And I started digging and very quickly sort of uncovered, which we talked to in the film, about how sort of this core group of cannabis advocates who had fought long and hard in Canada, since we're talking since the 60s, to make weed legal in Canada, were very quickly being shut out of the promised land. So basically, everyone who'd struggled and went to jail and had, protested and finally got weed to be legal were quickly being sort of cut out of the whole business by corporations, by breweries, and surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, by police officers, people who had basically put them away now, or have quickly now gone into pot as a business. So I just found that very Shakespearean, found
Yeah.
it interesting. It reminded me a lot of my father's an entrepreneur, and I guess as filmmakers we are too. And so I have very vivid memories of him trying to kind of get past a certain point when dealing with bureaucracy or dealing with sort of governments and rules and regulations, and struggling because he didn't have enough money and he didn't have enough power to kind of get past a certain point. And so I feel sort of Canada in general is, we're not really risk takers as a nation. So I feel like it was a good story to talk about that in a way, like that idea of risk, that idea of Canadianness, playing it safe, and just the general strangeness of the whole idea of legalizing weed and having the government become your dealer. Seemed to be something very uniquely Canadian, but something that you could really talk to outside. Like if you go to a cocktail party and try to explain the beer store or the CBO or
Yeah.
like why weed is run by the government, people are interested. People are going to listen to that story. So I was like, they'll probably watch that movie.
Absolutely. And the fact of the matter is, it does open your eyes, and then it brings in a whole bunch of other questions because you don't know. For instance, it's illegal if you've ever smoked weed to cross the border.
Yeah.
So if it's not legalized in the state that you're going to, is that still the case? Even though it's legalized in Canada, there's so much that doesn't make sense, even though the government has tried to make it make sense.
Completely. And obviously, especially with crossing borders now, and you can see when you go to the airport or the border, don't bring weed into the States and don't travel with it. And people are being banned because of it. And at some point, even if you were working for a cannabis company, which is completely legitimate in Canada, the border guards were still banning you or turning you away. So yeah, that part is really interesting. I think the way that we went about it is also really interesting too. I think people were really eager to have it legalized, but didn't really ask a lot of questions about who was winning and losing in that legalization. And even a year forward now, so I made the film about a year ago. it's interesting to see how that's developed as well. So yeah, I just wanted to shine a spotlight on those people specifically. And, I didn't want to make another stoner film because I felt like, they've been done and they're great. And I'm sure people would do a couple more. But I also want to highlight the people that actually kind of are using it for medicine or using it in their everyday use, or just kind of, as my producer Ashley said, the adults who are using it and what that means. And often they're not the people you think they are. They're probably your next door neighbor, like you never know.
That's the part that I loved about it, because I've never done it. I was never into it. So it's not something that I've necessarily looked into or have understood to a great degree. But the way you portray your main character, doing it, she calls herself a dealer, which obviously she is, but she's doing it for all the right reasons. Now I know if it was, if you take Breaking Bad, for instance, you could say he's doing it for all the right reasons, but it's the complete different side of a spectrum, right? She's actually doing it to help people out and to heal them, yet the government still won't let her in unless she's been arrested.
Yeah.
Like, there's so much to it that just doesn't make sense.
That's if you're a filmmaker, you very well know the world of grants and the government grant system. So that to me was just my inside joke on like they always have these grants that you're not able to access no matter what you do or who you are. So to me, it felt kind of the same when I started looking into the way that you had to get a cannabis license to grow or to be an operator in Ontario. It's like, it's very expensive and it's very complicated. So it does kind of cut you out. I too wasn't a cannabis user coming into this. I didn't have much. I did live in the Netherlands for a year, so I saw kind of how blasé it was other than to the tourists. So I got an idea of like what the future of it would look like. And so when I started digging into it, it was from the interest of like, okay, how is this legalization working and who are the people kind of being hurt or helped, or and to me quickly Anne's character developed into, as you said, those people who really treat it seriously and fought really hard to legalize it because they felt it was an untapped resource to help people in various ways, from stress all the way up to PTSD. I mean, it's just very big unexplored territory. So that quickly became, oh, that's the way into the story for me. And it was also very revealing. I have to tell you that anyone who knows me was very surprised I would make a movie on cannabis. And for me, vice versa, as I got notes from people I knew and colleagues and everything, I very quickly realized that a lot of people were using cannabis that I had no idea were using it at all. So right? It was very quickly like, you kind of find out more about your neighbor than you thought. And they're like, oh, you got to talk to this person. They're a huge user. I'm like, they are. I've known them for years. And it's never. So again, I was quickly able to kind of imagine these adults that are these characters in our film, because they were revealed to me in the same way and sort of like, oh, really? And they use them for various sort of help them cope with stress or just for fun. So it was a learning curve for me to know.
And I think that's one of the good things about it being legalized, is that all these people who have been hiding behind closed doors and not telling people what health benefits it has, they're now able to talk about their situation. For instance, same situation as you, not knowing who does what. I have a friend who he had a stutter, and once he started using it, his stutter went away. And it's just not a story that you'd normally hear, because it was so hush hush, can't talk about it, right? So I think your film will definitely help people open up about it even more.
Yeah, I hope so. And I hope people start asking questions about like how we got here, and sort of, it's interesting. It's sad in a way, like these big corporations are running it. That was never the intention, and the people who kind of fought to legalize it and wrote the legislation, they especially, I mean, I'm talking specific to Ontario, although I think it happened in a lot of the provinces that people, these conglomerates are now running it. And it was supposed to be a mom and pop type bill to help sort of small players develop this kind of cottage industry into something that would promote a lot of entrepreneurism. And it didn't go that way very quickly, which is really unfortunate, as you say, especially since it's helping a lot of people, and you need all those people, and all that knowledge got lost because, you couldn't work for the government if you had a record or had admitted to using drugs. So we kind of touched on that in the film as well, that all this knowledge base was excluded from the whole thing because you couldn't admit that you did all this. So in order to get hired. So yeah, it's interesting. I think it will maybe equalize itself out a little bit, but I'm not sure it will as much as everyone had hoped it would be.
Right. And then starting writing this film about something you know very little about, and then to direct it, did you ever expect that it would be doing the festival circuit and that you'd be going to Whistler Film Festival?
Uh, no, I mean, I'd hoped. I thought, I mean, as a savvy writer director, I knew this topic would probably hit if I could get it written in time and I could ride the zeitgeist a bit. I thought it would start a conversation. It was a rabbit hole I kind of chose to go down, partly because I knew it was an interesting subject, partly because that entrepreneur angle really interested me and it made me laugh, and I've dealt with more of my share of bureaucracy, so it was exciting. I mean, we've had it play in Whistler, and a lot of people have reacted really positive to it, especially sort of what I call your average film goer, not your sort of film, you know, film lover, but just sort of average people walking to the theater. And those are always my favorite people to like react and like the jokes. You're always so worried that you're going to write things that no one's going to understand. So it's nice to hear, regular people having a laugh about it and relating to the bureaucracy and relating to sort of all the, the Canadiana in it in a good way. So I was happy to see a large diverse audience, not necessarily just cannabis users, coming to the film and being able to relate to, showing up at the government office and trying to get anything done, and having a good laugh about that, right? So yeah, it's not just.
My favorite thing was your reference to Winnipeg. I thought it was very clever, and being that I'm situated in Winnipeg, it was very nice to hear it, being called, Canada's Taj Mahal.
Canada's Taj Mahal, right? When I found that, well, my mom's from Winnipeg, so I have family connections, and Jess is from Winnipeg, our lead. So, and once I saw that video, which is an amazing video, by the way, it's even better than just the Taj Mahal. I could only include that little bit, but I couldn't help myself. I had to like throw some love to Winnipeg.
Absolutely, that's good. I like it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, did you have a ton of experience with different governments when you worked for BBC? And is that what sort of made you take that or have that take on this in the movie?
When I worked for BBC?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I worked in the World Service. So I worked for BBC for Afghanistan. So I definitely got a very interesting insight into sort of the way international governments work. So yeah, it helps me, especially for a movie like this, that being my first job in media, and that's sort of where my love for media started. I came in it from after my MBA, of all things. I was not born with a film camera in my hand. So for me, going through that and seeing, being able to take all the courses, the journalist courses, and then moving into BBC radio drama and having that kind of training as well, and then to their TV side as well. So yeah, all that training and that working with the BBC sort of really helped prep me, especially when doing like research for this and trying to find the story and the heart of it helped. And the sense of humor, like I think I have a bit of a British sense of humor. I always think Canadian humor is like British humor that Americans understand. So
like, a good way of putting it.
That's where I kind of, so the humor, the silliness of it all, and everyone in the world has bureaucracy, so yeah, it wasn't too hard to make a leap.
Now, your parents, your dad was an entrepreneur, your mom worked for CBC, but they wanted you to go into banking. Why do you think they tried to sort of steer you away from the journalism side of things?
Oh, well, actually, they didn't really push me. So my dad was an entrepreneur. My mom did work for CBC for a bit, and then she sort of married my dad, and they kind of together, had a wild and crazy adventures in running their own businesses and moving around. I think I moved to Cayman and grew up in Cayman Islands, and then moved back through Boca Raton in Florida. And yeah, we had a very National Lampoon upbringing. And I had wanted to be a doctor since I was 2. So for me, I actually followed that right through until my undergrad. So I basically did a co-op at Hospital for Sick Children in Ontario in the OR. I had done hospital chaplaincy. I had gone to pre-med, and I actually ended up getting to med school before I decided, like, I don't think this is for me. So that was sort of the first, heart attack for parents. We'll count that heart attack one of many. And then after that, I sort of had gone over. Wanted to go back overseas, and I went to England and to London to do my MBA because I didn't quite know what to do. So I did that, and then I got offered a lot of banking jobs and one job from the BBC World Service. So there's heart attack number two. Right? So it's like I have all these great jobs, and there's this one really interesting job working for BBC for Afghanistan. And of course, for Afghanistan, it's just the topper that your parents want to hear. So yeah,
Sure.
so basically, it was no, and they've been supportive ever since. Probably a bit confused at times, but yeah, I've sort of found my own way. It took me a long time to kind of get to this point, and I've done a million other jobs in film and television. So it's been a journey of learning rather than knowing, being born with it. But that's good. It's a different way. It's often people always say in film and television, I couldn't ever do anything else. But I think there's a small segment of us who could be doing something else. And I think it's just as valid because you kind of have to recommit every day knowing that you could walk away and do something else with your life. So I think sometimes that's an equally hard challenge than, being born to what you love to do, but also kind of knowing you have other options. And that gets even more challenging as you get a family and other things. So I think all of us have to recommit every couple of years to this industry that we love and is very, crazy. I don't know how else to say it.
Knowing you have other options is good, but clearly you're meant to be doing what you're doing. You have been successful. I think you'll continue to be successful.
Yeah.
What's your next project? Is it directing, writing, producing? I know you're all over the map.
Yeah. So I write and direct now. So I have a TV pilot that I'm shopping about fatherhood. I also stayed at home with my little one, and he was on set for this movie because I was a stay-at-home. So he had followed this whole process, even though he's now only 5. So anyway, yeah, he doesn't understand any of it. But so there's that. I did another TV pilot, and now I'm writing another feature as well, which is sort of a black comedy, sort of action comedy, black comedy adventure. So it's called tentatively called Nice People. So that's my next little project. So yeah, I'm doing now both film and television.
That's amazing. Good for you.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Canadian Strain. When are the public going to be able to get a hold of this and see what we're talking about?
Oh, well, so we think, according to the distributor here in Canada, it's looking like spring of next year is coming out. Exact date is not known, but it should be coming, to theaters and iTunes and, everywhere and anywhere.
That's super exciting.
Yeah. Yeah, it's super exciting. That's one of the best parts is making it, like writing it and then making it with a bunch of great people. So many great cast and producer was amazing. My producing partner is amazing. So that was a lot of fun and a whole whack of adventure because there was only 4 of us making the film in 9 days. So that was amazing. And then, obviously the next part is festivals. But then one of my favorites is just putting in front of just everyday people who are watching it, wherever they are watching it and getting a reaction out of it is always the best. So that's one of my favorites. Yeah. Making people laugh.
I don't want to spoil anything, so I won't talk about his character specifically, but Colin Mockery's in it, which is amazing. Great actor. Again, I don't want to spoil anything, but viewers, make sure that you check out this film because it is really well done and it will open your eyes, whether you're a cannabis user already or you're thinking about it or you've never let it cross your mind. It's something you should.
I hope so. I hope it's it's just come for the fun. And if you ever dealt with a government office, come for that too. So, that's everyone in Canada, right? Like that's an inclusive movie right there, right? If you've ever dealt with the government, come see this movie. I don't know what else I can do to make it more inclusive than that. Just add superheroes, I guess. But after that, I don't know what else I can do. Weed and government. We got to apply. Something's got to apply to you after that. So
absolutely. Now the last question that I try to ask each of my guests is actually about your socks. So knowing a little bit about your background, knowing that you've been all over the place, you've had different jobs in different fields, I'd like to know what type of socks you wear.
Oh man, warm ones. I don't know what to tell you, like warm, comfy socks, because I'm always on my feet walking. So I need something like that's comfortable, and I'm always wandering and running around. So yeah, I like a nice pair of like hiking socks. As boring as it is, they get the feet, they keep you comfy and you can be on your feet for hours,
There
right?
you
If you're on a film set, forget it. You're not sitting around if you don't have a huge crew. So you're doing a million things. You better be comfortable. So, I learned that in the BBC, right? Change your socks, right? That's the most important thing,
Absolutely. It
right?
is the most important thing.
That's the
Yes.
thing in the army, right? Like we had a bunch of security advisors, for Afghanistan, and they were always like, it was like their big rule, right? Bring a pair of change of socks, change your socks. Like it was a big deal. So yeah, so I'm practical. Sorry to
Good.
disappoint.
No, you don't at all. That's a great story. I like it. Thank you so much, Geordie. I really appreciate your time.
It was a pleasure speaking with you. Thanks for, supporting the film.
You bet.